All right, welcome to episode 7 of Behind the Turf. My name is Phil Jackson. I'm managing partner at Nature's Turf, and I am joined with
Ruth Wilkerson,
our support team member, who's going to guide us through common client questions.
Ooh, I like that.
And
Common client concerns would have been 3 C's. Ooh.
I didn't even do that. Sorry. And then, of course, Jared Koenig, who's going to keep us on track and make sure we give you good, knowledgeable information that is correct.
Yeah, and I'm also here to interpret.
Fact checker.
It says.
Yes. Why don't we change you to interpreter?
I'm really just here to make what he
support team
says.
member / interpreter.
Yeah. I'm here to
Which,
make what he says.
interestingly enough, is like kind of y'all's job sometimes. I send y'all call logs and I type out what's wrong, and then I read what you guys actually send to clients, and I'm like, that's way better than what I said.
It just to make sense.
Okay, so episode 7, though, we'll get to what we're talking about today is weed prevention, which is a lot of information to cover. So first, we need to acknowledge our sponsor, which is Nature's Turf. Our expert weed elimination fertilization services guarantee the health of your lawn. At Nature's Turf, our experienced team will make the correct applications at the best time to ensure your lawn is healthy and weed-free.
I keep wanting to say healthy and happy.
Oh, that's good. We know.
It is happy.
We'll do that for episode 8.
Okay.
There you go.
Same sponsor.
Yeah.
All right, Jared, go ahead and dive into, as far as weed prevention goes, number one thing I think of is Preemergence. So if you agree with me, can you dive into what is a Preemergent?
You know I agree with you on this, Phil. Preemergence, they are, of the things that we're hired to do, Adam, your brother, always says that we're there to, people want green grass and they want as few weeds as possible.
Right.
And in order to provide number 2, which for a lot of people is number 1, as few weeds as possible, the cornerstone of that control is pre-emergent applications. With them, we are able to do a whole lot more with a whole lot less with regards to weed control.
So Ruth, again, like kind of getting into this business, not knowing a lot about lawn care, pre-emergence. What were you thinking how do you explain to the customers? Really, I mean, like when you're talking to clients, the importance of it, because obviously pre-emergence happen when most people aren't thinking about their lawns.
Yeah. It's very challenging to convey how necessary it is, because if we don't get it in that process before the seeds have germinated, we're playing just this really frustrating game of trying to catch them as they pop up. And so clients are just not going to have the results that they're hoping to get. Whereas if we can get all those pre-emergents out, we're stopping something before it even has a chance to start. Which, like you said, they're looking at their lawn and they're saying, I have no weeds currently. Well, the reason you have no weeds currently is because we did something back in the winter time when you didn't think it was necessary then either.
Right.
And I had to convince you that it was.
Because their grass was brown. If it's a Bermuda or zoysia, it's
which the common misconception is my grass is dead.
Right.
And it's not. It's sleeping like a bear. It's hibernating.
Technically, what is it doing?
It's dormant. Yeah, it's a stress response to cold temperatures. But normally I'm the vocabulary person. And shout out to Ruth for the use of germination.
Well, I think our clients are intelligent. And again,
they are very much. They are very much.
Yeah,
that's why we have these conversations with our clients. They're smart people that are able to understand these concepts, and that's why we have these conversations.
But from a technical standpoint, how does a pre-emergent, when we're saying it's put down when people aren't thinking about their turf, it's the timing on it's basically in the fall when the grass is turning brown, and then it's happening in early spring, late winter when the grass hasn't come out of dormancy. So it's happening when we say it's just happening basically when there's no real active growth in the turf. Sure. But why do we do it at that time, and how does it work?
Understanding how it works is important to this conversation. So the way that pre-emergents work is they work by stopping root formation. Ruth mentioned germination. The first thing that happens when a seed germinates is a root comes out. When I have this conversation with our technicians and with our team, I often... in elementary school, if you ever did the lima bean thing where they had you put a lima bean in wet paper towels, and after a few days you open those paper towels up and it started to grow. Well, the 2 first things that come out of a seed are one root fiber called a radical and the first stem. The way that weed control products work, pre-emergent specifically, is they work by stopping cell division in the roots or cell elongation in the roots, depending on the product, and they stop roots from forming. The reason that we have to do it when we do it is because we have to have those products down before those roots start to form. Post-emergence control is done differently. That's when you see the guys with the backpacks on. But the pre-emergent control has to be down before those weeds start to germinate. So we have to be strategic about that. There are some weeds that come on very early. I guess it's important to acknowledge the fact, too, that there are two big groups of weeds. There are weeds that happen in the winter, and there are weeds that happen in the summer. The weeds that happen in the wintertime, we're out there to prevent early ones like henbit. When it's still kind of warm outside, we're putting out fall pre-emergence, right? Well, in the springtime, we're out there really early because we're trying to prevent crabgrass. I mean, among other things, certainly, but crabgrass happens very early. And so we're strategically timing these things to make sure that that barrier is in place. You can almost imagine that there's like this barrier in the ground, and that's exactly what there is. And as they start to germinate, we stop them as they start to grow at the very, very earliest stages.
Yeah. There's a question that I get sometimes is why you just put out pre-emergence, because we do 3 in the fall and winter and then 3 in the spring. And I don't think people realize that they're all a little bit different.
Yeah.
So they're very strategically chosen.
That's a really good way to put that.
Yeah.
They also don't last a super long time, which is a good thing. At the end of the day, I don't think any of us want to do anything, certainly not at this table, but the grand us, if anybody's, everybody that's listening to this, we don't want to do something that's going to have, large environmental impacts and huge staying power and problems like that. We're fortunate that the EPA does a really good job of vetting those things. And so we apply, the right products based on the label, consistent with labeling, but they don't last forever either. And that's a big part of why we have, not only do we get to strategically sort of knit together a program that will be most effective for weeds in season, but we get to do it in a time frame that is most effective as well, because they don't last forever.
And it's a coverage thing too, right? Like you're guaranteeing you're going to get better results by spreading out that application over a 2 or 3 period than 1, right?
Yeah, well, you get better duration. You normalize certain variables that may be concerning for certain things. Yeah, there's a lot of advantages to breaking up a program over a few applications.
Yeah.
So, if, I want to talk a little bit about, like, if you're listening to this and you've missed that season that we're talking about and you haven't put any pre-emergence down, what are the best options, really?
I'll start this. The best thing to do is to start, right?
Yeah.
Now, the expectation is we'll have to have this conversation, I'm sure, at some point this year. Maybe somebody had new sod and we couldn't do pre-emergence because it's the best thing.
Good
We've
example.
already had
That's a good
that.
example.
We've
Yeah.
already had that happen.
Small aside, it's best to avoid new sod with pre-emergence because they stop root formation. So we don't want to stop the root formation in new sod, but we can come back to that in a minute if you want to. But more importantly for this conversation, say somebody... what would we tell somebody that couldn't get pre-emergence in the spring, Ruth?
To manage their expectations that you're going to have some weed emergence and we're going to get it under control and we can start fresh in the fall as far as getting those down for them. But we're confident that we can help reduce the impact of the weeds in their lawn. It's just going to take time. It takes a little more time when we're responding reactively versus preventatively.
And that's the thing, is just using less product, talking about doing it in an environmentally friendly way. It's like, the pre-emergence just allows us to use less products during the growing season.
Yeah.
You get to do more with less.
You want a company that's going to, believe it or not, there are companies out there who are not responsible in how they apply products. I had somebody at my home who was like, I've got extra product, I'm just going to dump it on your lawn. They don't care. It's important to find a company that cares about doing things the right way.
Sure.
I was going to go back to mowing. I mean, if you didn't get the pre-emergence, do not stop mowing. Mow. Mow every 5 days if you can't do every 7 days.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's not enough, but keep those weeds knocked down, stimulate that growth in the turf. I feel like too many people are just like, well, I missed it, so.
Yeah. The worst thing that you can do is throw in the towel or wait or anything, because there's a lot of good that we can do. In the middle of summer, even if you miss those pre-emergence, let's work on that plant health. To Ruth's point, let's try to do some damage to the existing weeds. Let's reduce that seed bank. Let's try to reduce the number of seeds that are in the ground or going to be put in the ground that we then have to prevent at some point with a pre-emergent. Keep mowing so that way they don't go to seed. They stay injured. There's the best thing to do is start, but certainly manage your expectations. With the first time that we're out there, depending on the condition the yard's in when we got there, within a couple of weeks, you're going to see some weeds start to die. But if there's no pre-emergent barrier to roost point, there may be more, and that's okay. We'll help take care of those as well. But within a few months, get through a few pre-emergent cycles, you should see a major reduction in weed pressure. And then hopefully, within the year, you're going to see a huge reduction in the following season when we're back to those same weeds and you simply do not have as many.
And I feel like, of course, this is what we do for a living. So of course we want people to stay on the program year round, but we live in Georgia. If you're in the South, like it's just, we've all had those Christmases where we got our shorts on and a polo, because it's warm, and so it's like, it's staying on top of it. It's not only building with the pre-emergence, but when there is breakthrough, it's just making sure somebody's there to stop it before it gets out of control. So
I think that's there should be sort of a conversation. We've had this conversation a couple of times. We certainly have it inside a lot, but there's healthy expectations too about weed control and unhealthy expectations. In the Thatch podcast, we talked about the idea of a threshold. In this podcast, we absolutely should talk about the idea of a threshold. There are certain weed challenges. Go back and listen to our State of the POA address. That's a really good one that talks about certain weed control challenges for a very prominent winter weed. But they exist in the summertime too. There's perennial weeds, Dallas grass, broom sedge, things like that are real pains. And it's important to understand those challenges so that way you understand the strategy. It's also important to understand that because these products don't last forever and we've got lots of variables, weather, biological organisms, that if there is a little breakthrough, we got solutions for that. And it's totally healthy and totally normal. And we're on the same team as you are. We want the same thing that you want.
Just kind of wrapping it up. I love that we did this episode. I think that for so many people, they just don't know. Like if you just explain to them the way the pre-emergence work, it's like a light bulb goes off. And that's how so many clients are. It's like once you explain it to them, they're like, oh yeah, this is going to prevent me from frustrations down the road just to keep this service going and having you guys come out.
Yeah.
I'm biased, but we have like the best customers ever. It's great when they call in and they have a conversation with Ruth or Teresa or Heather or Brandy and they're receptive and they go, oh, Ruth had a great one yesterday about a guy that has some environmental issues that I'm sure we'll touch on at some point, sun availability, light availability issues. And there is nothing more rewarding for us than when we get to have a conversation with somebody and it's like right there, and we have the best.
Well, it builds that
Earth.
relationship,
It does.
Yeah.
Because there's not always a product. There's always something we can do.
And
A lot of times.
Sometimes the best thing's information, and we got that too.
Right. All right. Well, that wraps us up for episode 7 of Behind the Turf. Appreciate you tuning in. If you have any questions, drop us a comment, give us a call. Episode 8 will be out shortly.